sure enough, they recreated a machine that could bring us a lot more food and biofuel by spinning the plasma fields in counter rotating vortices in an inert chamber. So, who did this? Well, William Levengood and Penny Kelly. And just to get myself further in trouble, this is the machine that is in my movie called Charge Density Plasma. And again, you stick the seeds in between these two metal plates.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today with me, Patty Greer, top right. Chris Burr is on the bottom, holding tight here. We're going to talk about something unusual today. C60 EVO. But when you're thinking about C60, the process for it being created, what does that have to do with science they laughed at? What does it have to do with plasma physics and counter rotating plasma fields? That is the question we're going to answer today, and ask more questions as we go along. If I could read a quote for everybody here: the science they laughed at, how crop circle research led to an award-winning filmmaker to the suppressed longevity molecule ESS60, c60evo.com/adapt2030. And Patty, what do we see here? Award-winning filmmaker. You blinded me with that.
Yeah, he's kind of a tricky little guy. He likes to kind of come and go. I've got these all over the house. They're kind of heavy. It's an EBE award for one of my movies. I don't know why they make them so heavy. Probably so people don't do things like that. But I spent 10 years going in crop circles. It was just wonderful. You're a farmer, so you know how incredible it is just to be there on the land, enjoying the plants and being part of nature. But this was different. This was like all of a sudden the farm field dipped down in all these circles and formations and sacred geometry. And I mean, it was, I'd wake up in the morning near Stonehenge at the B&B, and the host would say, "Oh, mate, we've got 2 new crop circles down the road." So we'd go out, it was really exciting. I was in more than 100, and for me, it wasn't like some deep state anything. It was just these gorgeous formations and farm fields. But my 8th movie, Crop Circle Diaries, was the one that kind of got me in trouble, apparently, because I discovered the science. I was invited to the lab of William Levengood, and he had died the year before, but for some reason, I was chosen to go there and look at his research and meet Penny Kelly, who had worked with him for the last 16 years of his life. And together they discovered that crop circles were absolutely real, but that the seeds inside the plants were growing up to 400% more food and biofuel, which is huge. We're going to need to grow our farm fields back with the organic food, and the seeds that have been very carefully procured need to have this same technology, because crop circle seeds, with this long experiment that they did in the lab, turns out that if you hit them with charge density plasma in a lab, you can create the same technology that's happening in crop circles. And the technology is kind of unbelievable for most people, but ultimately it's not spaceships, it's not aliens in the earth or in the sky. In the lab, when they were re-engineering the wheat to try and see if they could recreate the frequencies, they discovered that ultimately crop circles are being created by spinning vortices coming out of the earth and counter rotating opposite direction vortices of spinning plasma. So that might be a mouthful, but it's spinning like tornadoes of energy that come out of the earth somehow with the intention of being a message that all languages can understand. Sacred geometry, binary code, pictograms mainly. And a pictogram is like a bird, a fish, a scarab. They had the ancient insect, the scarab, and the ancient bird, the what was that? The rising phoenix. And they had ancient everything, Orthoceras from the ocean 300 million years ago. They were along the seabeds. So they're bringing back all this in crop circles, giving us messages. And then in 2001 was this huge binary code that how could anybody deny? It wasn't there the day before, but it gave us a message for this 100 years that we were moving into. 2001 or 2, it was the alien face in the disc, and it said, warning us about what we're in now. Beware, in a binary code. Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception, conduit closing, in a very specific and clear binary code. And when they re engineered the technology in the lab, sure enough, they recreated a machine that could bring us a lot more food and biofuel by spinning the plasma fields in counter rotating vortices in an inert chamber. So, who did this? Well, William Levengood and Penny Kelly. And just to get myself further in trouble, this is the machine that is in my movie called Charge Density Plasma. And again, you stick the seeds in between these two metal plates, hit it at 30 something, charge density plasma. That's all I know. I was in the lab very quickly, taking as many photos as I could very quickly for my final film, Crop Circle Diaries. But all of this great, exciting information got me in a lot of trouble, and I kept getting wounded by bad people. But if it wasn't for the product that Chris makes in his lab, I definitely wouldn't be here. I don't know how he did it or the science did it, but I'm still here. My brain is back, my body's back. And it's this simple little organic olive oil with E.S.T, a miracle molecule, we call it, did win the Nobel Prize. So it's not a small molecule. But when Chris and I were taking people for a tour of what we're going to take you today of our lab in Houston, Texas, we're going to show you different parts of the lab and different mechanisms, but only a schematic of the reactor, which is this monstrous Star War machine in the back of the lab. It's huge, it's metal, it weighs tons. And Chris and Robert recreated it from another one, apparently, but they perfected it to the point where they can make the amount that we do today to supply people around the world with this incredible formula that won the Nobel Prize. And then other incredible peer-reviewed studies have taken the products from our lab, not anywhere else, and delivered incredible test results, which when I realized that we are with great intention making ESS60 in a lab by spinning, counter-rotating vortices of plasma, it was just one more thing where I just woke up and went, this is the coolest liaison, really excites me. So Chris is going to explain what I'm talking about when it comes to making this formula that won the Nobel Prize. Hit it, Chris.
Well, yeah. And to be kind of clear, the formula didn't win the Nobel Prize. The scientists who discovered this molecule. So what I'm holding up is the molecule. We call it ESS60, and it was discovered in 1985. The scientists who discovered it won the Nobel Prize in 1996 for that discovery. And they actually thought the molecule would be toxic because some of the shapes on the exterior, not the same chemical formula, but some of the shapes on the exterior of this ESS60 molecule are the same as benzene, and benzene is known to be toxic and known to be carcinogenic. So they threw it in a toxicity study. And instead of being toxic, the test subject that they gave it to, in this case, it was Wistar rats, lived 90% longer than the control group. And I often get asked, and when Patty kind of visited our facility, hey, how do you make these ESS60 molecules? And so we've got this graph, this outline of how we make them. It's the first slide in this presentation. And one of the things to note first is that you can see these two graphite rods are kind of impinging on each other. They're being pushed in towards each other, and you need to vaporize graphite. Well, it turns out that graphite is one of the hardest materials on the planet to vaporize. You need local temperatures of the sun to vaporize the graphite. So when you're watching this through the window, you can actually watch this reaction. There's a beautiful plasma that's, the classic arc, like a magnetic field arc that's going between these two graphite rods. Now, one of the things, as I'm talking about graphite rods and temperatures of the sun, I want to make very clear that this ESS60 molecule is a naturally occurring molecule. So whether you've ever taken our product or not, you have been exposed to this molecule. And I'll offer up as evidence that you can collect the soot from a candle flame, and normally you would do that by putting a cold steel plate over the candle flame, and you would get this deep, dark soot on that cold steel plate. That deep, dark soot would have parts per million or parts per billion of the ESS60 molecule. So we've all been exposed to it. Now, if we come back, we're looking at this. You've got these local temperatures of the sun between these two graphite rods. That's why you see a lot of water cooling, right? The entire chamber is water cooled. In fact, these arms, and those arms are where we actually have copper rods that are attached to graphite rods that are pushing those graphite rods towards each other as the tips of those rods vaporize. Now there's water cooling all along here. There's something that happens as you're vaporizing graphite rods in this kind of scenario is if you don't rotate them at all, they'll actually start to evaporate and deposit and shift, and they'll end up making a very distinct and inconvenient slope on that face. Instead of remaining parallel, the slope between them will change, and that's actually detrimental to production. If you spin them the same direction, that same thing will happen, right? That's just rotating. So we actually have to rotate these graphite rods in opposite directions so that that gap between the graphite rods stays parallel. And that's the part where Patty was like, oh, you've got this plasma, you've got these rotating rods, they're counter-rotating, and that kind of brought all of the things together for Patty. Some more things to talk about in terms of production. As you can imagine already, this is a tough thing to do. In order for this manufacturing process to work, you actually need to have zero oxygen present. So the first thing you do is you get everything sealed up, you get the rods in place, and then you use this vacuum pump to suck out all the air that's in the chamber. You use this helium gas to push helium gas into the chamber. Then you actually suck it all out again to make sure you get rid of all of the oxygen, and then you fill it back up with helium again. It's interesting that when you're filling it up with helium, you don't take it all the way up to the point of atmospheric pressure. You keep it at a slight vacuum. The presence of oxygen will kill all production of fullerenes. Those are the collection of molecules. I'll talk about that in a second. It will kill all production of fullerenes. And then if you're producing not at a slight vacuum, you'll dramatically reduce the amount of fullerenes that you're producing. And then you look at this window, we've got these local temperatures of the sun. Of course, you can watch this. If you do not use welder's goggles, you will burn out your retina. And in fact, if you let the light from this reaction shine on your skin, you will get a sunburn because it is local temperatures of the sun. So that is the kind of the long and short of the production process. Our equipment has quite a few modifications from this, but the fundamental principles are the same. I'm very proud to share that our equipment is still to this day, 34 years later, the most efficient fullerene manufacturing equipment style available. So very proud of that. We've been manufacturing, we are the oldest and longest manufacturer of this molecule and distributor on the planet.
Chris, could I ask you a quick question? Like, what's your throughput on that? Like your production, are we talking about grams, micrograms, ounces, kilograms? I mean, what are we talking about on a run of the machine here that you show with the graphite rods?
Yeah, it's about 250 grams per run. So it's a pretty small run. Like the reality is this is a very tough molecule to manufacture. And think about this, like the origin of this molecule, the reason that it won the Nobel Prize, not just because it's beautiful, and it is a beautiful molecule, right? It's because this molecule performs as well or better than the current best material in almost every application. So it makes better inks, better batteries, better tires, better photocells. And as you're thinking about that, it's like, well, why isn't it used everywhere? Why don't we have it in tires and batteries and photocells? And the reason is because this production process is so expensive and inconvenient that you can't make quantities that are good for those. We're actually very lucky that a small amount of this ESS60 molecule seems to have an outsized benefit for people's wellness and our most consistent testimonials. People take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. That's an outsized performance boost given how much of the molecule we're able to deliver in olive oil. Hopefully I got your question answered there.
Yeah, you certainly did. And I remember when you had talked earlier, that you had some other slides. I'd like to see those as well. Here, I want to turn that back on. So, the fullerene soot as such. Now, explain that process as we're moving through into the the purification, if there is such a.
Yep. No, that is the process. So just to kind of dwell here for just a minute, you're vaporizing this graphite. It's turning it into a soot. The best way I can kind of describe that soot is if you had a handful of it, and maybe it's got parallels with ink toner or copier toner, right? If you had a small handful of this stuff and you're turning your hands upside down, almost nothing will hit the ground. It's so light and fluffy. I mean, this is really kind of disastrous material to be working with because of that characteristic. And what comes out of that is called fullerenic soot. 90% of that fullerenic soot is garbage. It's actually amorphous carbon and has no benefits in this process. And so we've got to separate it. Only 10% of it is of value. That's on a good run, right? That's assuming you've got no oxygen there. That's assuming that you've got the right pressure that's just below atmospheric pressure. And so how do we separate this? Well, it's the same process. Imagine you had a mixture of sugar and sand, right? How would you separate these two things? You would typically just pour in water. The sugar would go into solution, so it would dissolve, and then you would filter it. That sand would stay on top of the filter, and the sugar would go through that filter in solution. Then you boil off that water, and you have your sugar crystals. The same thing is true for the soot. We use a solvent that dissolves the fullerenes. We filter it. That 90% of garbage stays on top of the filter. Our filters are really big. That 90% of garbage that is amorphous carbon stays on top of the filter. And then the fullerenes go through in solution. You boil off that solvent. The solvent in the case of the sugar and water was sugar and sand was water. We boil off that solvent, and then you're left with this is an example of toluene extracted fullerene soot. So really, we call this nomenclature I could improve on this slide. We call it extract. It's fullerene extract. And what is fullerene extract? It's actually a combination of a bunch of fullerenes, right? Fullerenes start at the most abundant is the carbon 60, and then next most abundant is carbon 70. You have additional molecules going up 74, 76 on up. You can notice in this slide that, yes, that C60, that carbon 60 molecule is a beautiful spherical shape. The C70 is a little bit more oblong shape, a little bit more rugby football shaped. And then the rest of them start to get round again. Now, of this soot, of this extract, right, this fullerene extract, about 80% of it is the carbon 60 that we're after. And, first we take it into carbon 60, then we take it into ESS60 with further processing. How do we do it? I'm gonna kind of skip through to here to the end. This is what's called an HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography. We're looking at Robert and I in the lab. You can see that color of the liquid is a little bit purple. When you have the ESS60 molecule in a clear solution, it is purple, which is kind of very cool. You take that black powder, you pour it into a clear liquid, and it turns purple. This HPLC is the way that we test and understand the concentration of the material and what's the concentration of the different components. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that is a chromatography column. It's a stainless steel column. It's got a material in it that as you flow the solution of fullerenes through that material, this carbon 60 comes out first. The C70 is slowed down because it has a higher molecular weight, and you're able to grab that fraction. And in the case of the HPLC, you're able to get a graph kind of like this. This is not a HPLC graph, but it kind of looks like this. It's an assessment of the relative abundances of the different molecules in that particular solution. The same process is how we separate the larger quantities of carbon-60. You can imagine this is a pretty small column. You're not getting large volumes through it. So we use a much larger chromatography setup in order to separate that carbon-60 from the rest of the materials. And then once we separate that carbon-60, we further refine it and we actually turn that into ESS60. The way we think about it is carbon-60 is for industrial applications, and there is peer-reviewed published research that proves that if you improperly process it, it's harmful. ESS60 is carbon-60 that's been processed for people and pets. And then we'll just show you that this is the molecule for which the Nobel Prize was awarded to the discoverers. And this is our lab. So some pretty cool stuff going on here. One, yes, those are kegs. And two, yes, that is a vat that you would make beer in. This is not a party place. The reality is when we first started producing at larger scales, the most cost-effective way to get a stainless steel container was just to take a standardized beer still. And we made some modifications to the top of it so that we could spin the olive oil and the ESS60 molecule for 3 weeks. By the way, at first, we thought it only needed to be 2 weeks. And in fact, I think a lot of the people who are in the industrial C60 space still think they only need 2 weeks. And that's why when we tested 22 of the products in the space, they were woefully low in concentration, except for one brand and of us, of course. And the reason I'm pretty altruistic, I'm hopeful that nobody's actually trying to rip off customers. I think they just, well, the reality is they don't have this HPLC. So if you're thinking about a production process and you want to track the concentration, how much has gone into solution, then you need an HPLC and you need a column that can be used to test the fullerene, the relative concentrations of the fullerenes. If you don't have the equipment, then you got to stop your production process. You got to take a sample. You have a line item cost. You got to ship it off to get tested. You get the results back a couple days later, and then do you fire up your production process again? So because this is in-house for us, we just take a sample, run it across the hall, run that sample through the HPLC, and we know what the concentration is. So what ended up happening was, we'll roll back a little bit. In the original study that was published out of the University of Paris that used our material, and actually our lab is mentioned in that study, they used an Erlenmeyer flask to mix the olive oil with the ESS60 molecule. And you can imagine that the fluid dynamics, the way the fluids flow in this Erlenmeyer flask, are very different than how they will flow in these larger containers. And it turns out they're so different that you actually use half again as much time. So in that Erlenmeyer flask, you only need 2 weeks to get to saturation. In these devices, you actually need 3 weeks. So they're mixed for 3 weeks. If you're mixing, by the way, it's a high speed. We're actually mixing the propeller that's in there. It's a pretty big propeller. It's creating this big vortex. And if you had oxygen in the buffer, in that gas that's buffering the liquid, so that gas that sits above the liquid, it would be folding in oxygen into this olive oil. And that is a very bad thing. You don't want to oxidize your olive oil. The ESS60 is actually safe. So what we do, you can see here, actually you can see a little bit better here, this blue tubing, and that's a flow meter. That is actually nitrogen gas that's getting fed into the container, into the vat, so that it has a nitrogen gas buffer. You can see it here with the blue tube, and then the tubing across the wall is going so that nitrogen gas. Nitrogen is an inert gas. It will not react with the olive oil. It will not react with the ESS60. So you're protecting the integrity of the olive oil and the ESS60. And then I do, since I mentioned them, I do feel like I need to explain the kegs. The kegs are just a great storage place. They're sealed, so we can actually feed in nitrogen gas into them if we need to store the oil. Our oil typically doesn't get stored for more than a week. And then it's actually rolled out into production directly into the bottles and then labeled and then shipped out of this same facility. So it's all pretty amazing. You can see how clean it looks. We are, in fact, GMP, good manufacturing practices. There's Robert kind of doing some QA QC. There's Fabio, our director of research, also QA QC. And this is our lobby. Actually, at the top of our lobby, we've got this giant ESS60 molecule. And yeah, that's our facility.
I saw your insulated pull down garage door, because we're doing the same thing. We're turning our garage into a room and building another barn for the cars. So I see that thermal barrier there. Looks and again, the cleanliness of facilities, I've been to a fair few, but that looks like spotless, like I could eat off the floor in there. Plus, it looks really climate controlled to the nth degree in there as well. So whatever you want to dial that temperature to, it looks like, that garage door, that roll up door there is where you're going to be losing a lot of heat through those cracks or whatnot, but it looks like it's sealed up tremendously well. Just from my own glimpse of looking how to seal our places up here too, in terms of keeping dust and insects and either the cold or the warm out, which either one you don't want. But I'm going to say spot on with that. So that's just my own assessment from a 50,000 foot view looking down on it real quick.
Yeah, no, a lot goes into it, and those the requirements for GMP, which stands for good manufacturing practices, are pretty stringent. And actually, we've been manufacturing according to GMP processes forever. Think about it. We've been delivering commercial quantities of carbon nanomaterials to research institutions around the world since 1991. We have the lab. That's the highest standard you could ever meet or need to meet, right? When you deliver that product to that customer gives the product to their research assistant, gives that product to their research associate, their grad student. They test it and make sure we shipped what we sent them. That production, that level of quality has just carried through all along. And yeah, now we took the time to go ahead and get GMP because we felt it was valuable.
Well, you provided the C60 for the Wistar rat study as well.
We did. Yeah, it was a toxicity study. They thought that the molecule would kill the rats. And this is interesting. When you're doing your initial toxicity study, you actually don't give a little bit to the rats and see if they don't feel well. You give as much as they can consume and see what happens. And of course, they didn't die. They lived 90% longer than the control group. I always like to give credit to the researchers because they continue to, if there's anything that's ever true, at the point where all the water rats, the control rats, are dead, and all of the quote unquote poisonous rats, those given ESS60 and olive oil, are still alive, that is not toxic. Like, that is a fact that you cannot dispute at that moment. But they continued to do the animal husbandry for another 2.5 years so that we could have this phenomenal result. And now it's in the health space. So I'd love to give them as much, all the credit that they deserve.
Yeah. And Patty, could you walk me through this here now? This overlapping plasma field between the C60 EVO and then what you're talking about with the crop circles in terms of this energy, because we live in a sea of energy. This is a harvestable form that's around us in all places, and this is where the 0-point energy technologies come in. But the plasma field contained within that is something special in itself. So, like, what's that parallel between these two? Because you seem very astute on, how the mechanisms work for both.
Well, it wasn't until Chris mentioned it, and all of a sudden my Evo brain went all tweaky. Basically, the science of crop circles, which has been denied since the beginning of time, is an earth science. It's all natural. And it's the important fact that people don't realize is intention has a lot to do with manifestation, needless to say. And when people are like, what's plasma? Everything is. Everything that you see in front of you, wood table, ceramic, me, you, everything is plasma, and plasma moves constantly all the time. And then our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions come into play, where our mind is sending a plasmic field with intention to someone to send a message or to communicate, we're sending that message out into the world by moving plasma. And that is energy in motion, is emotion moving the plasma field. So when we start looking at spaceship technology, the little bit that we know or the lot that we know, turns out it's counter-rotating, spinning vortices of plasma or plasma fields, but they're counter-rotating to create the 0 point, which, is what's creating, shall we say, free energy. It's also 0 point, probably ultimately is where this charge density plasma machine is going to the 0 point. Crop circles, they happen in seconds. A lot of people don't want to believe it, but these spinning plasma vortices coming out of the earth in pairs, we have filmed them occasionally, but what we film is not a spinning tornado in the darkness of night. What we film are these balls of light at the base of the vortex of plasma, it turns out. So the plasma is spinning, counter-rotating, but they're set to a frequency that they have to get to the velocity to create the message between the two balls of light. So it's about spin velocity and it's about intention, which is really an important part of Chris's ESS60. They're counter-rotating the vortex, the spin, the energy of graphite rods. And they're blasting it at the heat of the sun with the intention of creating C60, ultimately cleaning it to be ESS60 for C60 Evo, people and pets. But it is basically the same scientific method of spinning the plasma fields with intention in counter-rotating vortices. So crop circles, I mean, they're mind-boggling and they're very, very, very ornate. Some of them are just beyond outrageous. This is my favorite, though, of all time. 409 circles in Fibonacci sequence, a spiral of Fibonacci sequence, but the mathematics were perfect. Happened on a rainy night, like I said. Not a footprint in sight. Wasn't there the night before. So miracles are happening on Earth with intention to give humanity reasons to wake up and come back to the reality of perhaps God, perhaps moving forward and allowing the evolution to happen. And all of the clutter and the muck of everything we're seeing on Earth right now is really, really emotionally challenging. And I can't think of a better remedy than a simple spoonful of this every day. C60 Evo, inorganic, extra virgin, cold pressed olive oil, but not from Costco. It's actually from Tunisia if you're buying it from us. So we've got this natural occurring ESS60 miracle molecule and exceptional olive oil. All you have to do is put it on a spoon in the morning. Happen to have one handy. It's effortless. It's effortless for changing the frequency of your movement and your mind control. The brain fog minimizes, your memory comes back. I'm just saying it might be a coincidence that everybody I know says this. You sleep better at night at the end of a more energized day. Not much to complain about with this formula. And I've done supplements and all kinds of organic this and that my whole life. Nothing ever affected me in such a positive way as this. So that's why they call it a miracle molecule. We are still running a holiday special. c60evo.com/adapt 2030. You can get special offers, which we want to talk about briefly because we are offering 6 packs for 40% off of our top items. And we've never done this, but it's been such an amazing year when a lot of companies are having real difficulties. C60 Evo didn't, because people sign up for subscriptions and they don't quit because it actually works. You actually feel the benefits. And so we're offering a 6-pack of olive oil for 40% off. You can get 2 for a discount or 3, but the 40% we've never offered the public. Typically, the best discount you're going to get is 25% off if you buy a case of 12. Screaming deal here, because through all these years, we've discovered that literally it takes 3 months to maximize the benefits of C60 Evo with better sleep, better energy, better focus, and overall well-being improvements. 3 months on average, people really fully notice. I call it the activation. This is the 4-ounce bottle. We're also doing the starter set, which is a 4-ounce bottle, and the C60 Evo Advanced Facial Serum, which is 21 organic, natural, vegan ingredients blended as the essence of rosemary oil and a base of chia seeds. So chia seed oil, it's mind-boggling. And it's got the ESS60, of course. So you've got all these many things in it that are a blessing, but you can pronounce pretty much and figure out what everything is rather than words you can't, such as many facial serums that are chemicals. There's descriptions of different things on the website, but if you continue down, you're going to see what other people have to say about Evo, not just us, but customer testimonials are endless from head to toe. People are getting amazing benefits from taking this oil daily, and the face and the body and the lip and the hair creams. Everything seems to work. We have a coupon code, ADAPT2030, at checkout. We'll get you a little bit of a discount. We also offer subscriptions where you'll get 20% off. We send it every month. You can cancel it anytime, but most people don't. Or you can get the screaming deal of the 6-pack for 40% off today. And like I said, it's not on our website. It's not on social media. It's only on David's homepage, c60evo.com/adapt2030.
That is a new plasma reactor. This is one of the newest ones. Again, the moving fields are no longer circular. They're trying to not bind them in that any longer. But what you described was sort of a zeta pinch where those two balls are coming together, and star formation is along the same thing with these Birkeland currents through our heavens, for a better term. Once they pinch and you get that compression, that's where that center point is for toroid fields that have connected together. So, I mean, we can go out into galactic scale for this, or we can bring it right down onto our Earth and into molecular level as well. It's so interesting how the creator has put all this together from the smallest all the way to the largest, and these phenomenon that we see of energies that are harnessable, usable, recreatable, and have great benefit for us, at least being partially utilized now versus hidden from us in the public, which an enormous amount of technologies have been. So I'm glad and very excited that some of these technologies are being and allowed to be utilized for the betterment of humanity, where we just see so many that could have provided so much benefit for our world, hidden from us or very deeply suppressed. So thank you both for putting out the tech that allows us to, keep our bodies functioning and, giving us these extra days to be able to live through existence here.
Well,
Awesome.
I think there's a lot of miracles and magic right where we are right now, right here. I think we just have to kind of be a little more open to what's possible, because it's everywhere. Amazing plasma fields, amazing, wonderful frequencies. You just got to kind of grab the good ones and let go of the rest of it. This is a new year. And now that we know consciousness flows where energy goes, right? Energy goes where consciousness flows.
Does it really? I happen to have my little hard copy right here of Think and Grow Rich. And 50 Law of Attraction concentration exercises. Where's my mind for 2026? I refuse to accept getting dragged along in this bullshit.
I agree.
I'm going to create the reality, and I'm going to skip through this. And those distractions, I'm not even looking at them. I'm focused on making money every day. I'm focused on success every day. I am escaping this reality, this matrix, with a hot air balloon. And as I look down, I see this distraction field below me as I'm looking at clear blue skies above me. You can create what you want, and I refuse to sit here and get dragged along, because this chaos is meant to encapsulate your mind in this. They need your energy too. You're part of the energy field that's being harvested.
Yep.
So if the more you can, faster you can escape out of that. Well, you want to keep your body in check too. You want to keep your body healthful and, optimally running during this time, because the more your body works, the faster it works, the more your mind works, the faster. And that symbiosis, like you say, throwing that pattern out into the field. Who are you sending that message to? The infinite consciousness.
Well, boost your brain power is all I can say. Easiest thing
Boost.
you'll find. C60 Evo on a spoon before noon. Kick some booty around the block all day long.
Oh, what a wonderful conversation. Patty Greer, top left. We'd switch the screens now. Chris Burr is turned to the right. I'm on the bottom here. C60evo.com/adapt2030. Check out the different specials there. See what can get your 2026 on, and refuse to be dragged along during the distraction fest. Create your own reality. It's kind of easy to do. It just creates thought and a little intent and some action, and then see what you can whip up in your own mixing bowl of life. Speaking of mixing things.
Yep. I'm looking forward. I'm with you. Like for 2026, a successful year. Patty and I are so lucky. I get to be the geeky scientist that you see that's in my blood. I get to connect with cool people like you guys. And then I get to reap the benefits of customers calling us and telling us all these amazing things that are happening to them. I couldn't be more blessed, and I'm really excited about what 2026 brings.
And for everybody out there, it's such a positive message that you can control how your year is going to go.
Yep.
So anyway, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching and your valuable time. Leave your comments below. I do read them and respond to them. So until next time, have a great day, week, month, and second. And that was a terrible outro. Let me do that again.